Hello. Um, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. And today I wanted to kick off our series interviewing different artists and designers about their life and design principles. So we have Megan, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Megan. And I just graduated with Katie from the CalArts MFA graphic design program this past May.
Yeah,
And we are both still recovering. So
there's that.
from
Yeah,
thesis crazy,
yeah.
but
Megan and I had a very strange experience in that we had a 3-year long master's program for the MFA, but the first year was completely online. So when we started talking to each other, we never met, living on, different parts of California, and just completely online for the first year of our education. And then the last two were in person. Do you think that has a, I know you can talk more about your previous experience, but like, did that affect your kind of journey in design education, do you think? And like, if you want to elaborate on any of that.
I think so. I do look back on my 3 years at CalArts, and I do really wish that we were in person for that year. Because I do think that once we got on campus, everything started to kind of click into place a little more, like just feeling a sense of belonging there and knowing your way around, knowing other professors besides like our core professor, Michael, getting to know other students, even part of the undergrad program. I really feel like I didn't really get going in that until probably like the second year of being on campus, which unfortunately was our last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do look back and I wish that that was in person, but at the same time, I did go to CalArts because of the pandemic, basically.
Totally.
So it was kind of what I signed up for. And if I could have chosen to like wait a year and just be in person for 3 years or just go and have it virtual for 1 year, I would have still done virtual for 1 year because I
Interesting.
just wanted to get started.
When you say you came to CalArts because of the pandemic, was it because you wanted to stay in California or like some other reason?
It was just because when I graduated from undergrad, I had a degree in graphic design and English, and I was just afraid of like not being able to get a job.
Yeah.
And especially with the way that the job market was during COVID, I was just like, this kind of feels like it's going to be a really hard year. And I was already imagining that I wanted to do grad school at some point.
Yeah.
So I kind of just thought when I graduated, why don't I just dive right in and just like go to school while everything is kind of on hold outside.
Got it.
And so yeah, that's what I did. And CalArts was the only, I thought about this like after graduating. So like June came
Oh
and
my God.
I
Was
was
CalArts the only
researching.
place you applied?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it was the only place that was still rolling for the fall.
Oh
And
my.
I like wanted to get right on it. I wanted to keep it going. Like, and so I
Crazy.
applied and I was like checking. They had a Google Doc where it said like which programs were still open. And so I was like, I got to put my resume together and my application together as soon as I can. I worked on it for like, I don't even know, 3 days. And I was like, okay, let's get it out before it closes.
That's crazy.
And yeah. And then I heard I got in, and then literally in the fall, we started. And that was how and I don't think I really did my research on,
No.
the school or just kind of, I just didn't know like what the deal was. And
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you also, I mean, I did research because I applied to 6 schools, and even doing that, A, there's not a ton online. B, like you literally cannot go until you're in this school. Like my analog to this is like, it's like dating. Like you can get other people's opinions of what it's like to date a certain person, but you're not going to know until you date them. It's the same with going to CalArts. Like I watched this YouTube video of this girl who was like reviewing her experience at CalArts before she dropped out. And she's like, yeah, I like hate this school. Like, you know, there's naked people everywhere and there's dogs in the classrooms. And I was like, that's what I want. Right. So like, it's, it's totally, you know, art school, even more than other colleges, it's very much a personal experience. And I feel like
Mm.
if you had known, like you wouldn't have ended up at CalArts. Like it's one of those things, like you just never know. So that's,
Mm.
I had no idea that
Yeah.
you applied to CalArts. That's so funny. That's like literally applying to Harvard and then just like getting in and being like, whatever.
Like Elwood's, just kind of.
Like it's hard. Not that
I
CalArts.
know. I do remember that Colin asked me like during my interview kind of about basically basically he was talking about
New composition.
abstraction. Um yeah, Colin asked me about like kind of how I view postmodern design or something like that. Something where he mentioned, you know, CalArts is a very postmodern school.
Right.
And I really didn't even know like what that meant. You know, like I was just like, cool, like I had no idea.
Oh my God.
I had no idea.
I feel like, and one of the reasons I'm really happy you're the first person I'm interviewing is that I feel like you've had such an interesting journey as a designer because you started, and maybe you can talk more about this, like you went to Notre Dame, you had this very traditional historical sort of approach to graphic design that you were taught, and when you graduated you made a lot of, I mean, I didn't see your portfolio, but like the stuff you were making when you started at CalArts was very like beautiful, elegant, traditional, very like feminine, and sort of had a flavor that was not really what the faculty liked. And as someone who also was making a lot of work that the faculty did not like I sort of see your trajectory as one where like you learned what CalArts wanted and then you like incorporated some of that into your work, but then we're also like, like you were still fighting against it. And I think that's actually a good thing that you didn't just like swallow, like maybe I'm like putting words in your mouth, but like I feel like you were indoctrinated at Notre Dame and then you did not get indoctrinated at CalArts. You very much were like, no, I'm going to figure out what I want to do. And I am curious if that's how you feel about it or just like sort of what it looked like to me as an outsider.
I think to a certain extent, I learned how to take what I was being critiqued on and turn it into something that like wasn't a weakness and more of a strength.
Yeah.
Because even though I could tend to be kind of tight, kind of structured, I do think in terms of like UX, UI design, that's really valuable. Oh, did I drop for a second?
No.
Sorry. My low power mode thing came on. But I think, yeah, I turned it into something that I could use in like UI UX design and make it something valuable and not just like shove it away and try to just subscribe to whatever I was being told. And I think by the end of CalArts, I do feel like I kind of stayed true to the designer I am and still tried my best to combine it with what I was learning at CalArts.
Yeah. I think you did too. I think that's like pretty evident by the time you were making your thesis work. Like it seemed like a good sort of mix of like the interests you started with, the style that you were interested in, and then like the kind of boundary expanding work that the professors were interested in. Although of course we all got our own lovely little critiques at the end about whether we did what we were supposed to do. But yeah, I think what's maybe interesting and valuable, like the channel that you are now part of, like my kind of intent is to explore the ways in which different kinds of educational models for art and design are all useful and all have good parts and bad parts. And I think it's important that like the kind of education you got at Notre Dame is also good, right? It's not bad education. It's geared towards a different kind of design, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you could have graduated if the pandemic didn't happen and you could have gotten very easily a corporate job making graphic design at a very
Yeah.
high level for a magazine or for a makeup company or for like any of the things that you were interested in. And I think it's very difficult to say what the ideal art school or a good art school or the best art school is, which is why it's important to not look at like art school like rankings or college rankings because those things are ephemeral, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
literally apples and oranges, like the different kinds of things you're being taught. Um,
Mm-hmm.
although there's maybe a good argument that like if you had had a little bit of your undergrad education teaching you form and function, and then like a little bit of your CalArts education teaching you experimentation and how to like make wacky forms, like there's a good balance there. But it seems like having both of those was good for you. Like I clearly did not have a design background and the teachers were always telling me not to loosen up, but to like not be
Yeah.
and weird and wacky. And so in that sense, we had very different experiences
Mm-hmm.
um, coming in and like getting very different critique. But
Mm-hmm.
like you benefited from having that sort of like structure to start with. And I think it would be
Right.
very interesting to imagine a world in which you started with the wacky and then had more formalism
Yeah.
later. But we only get one life, so
Yeah.
once you do a design PhD, I think you're probably done with your design education. So
Mm.
I'm curious if you have like words of wisdom about now newly emerging from 17 and a half years of graphic design education or whatever,
Yeah.
7 that you had.
Yeah.
Like if you I know we haven't had much distance, only like a couple months since graduation, but if you can
Mhm.
kind of like comment on that experience and like where you think that's
Mhm.
like pushed you to
Yeah.
explore for whatever job and life experience that you're gonna have now. I know that's a huge
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I think the way that we talked about our practices and becoming artists and designers and finding our style, finding all these things, those are all questions that I think you can kind of have just as a a high level designer. And I say high level in the way that you maybe are just like more interested in like the practice in the field of graphic design.
Yeah, totally.
Um but I am glad that I did have that like very practical education in undergrad where I could kind of pair the two. I guess it's just completely geared towards different things.
Yeah. It depends on what you want to make. And there's also
Mhm.
I think we're obviously biased because we went to CalArts for grad school instead of undergrad, but like
Mhm.
I definitely enjoyed being like a stupid 17-year-old and going to football games and having a normal college experience and then getting dumped into like the purified, crystallized art school environment later when I was
Right.
like older. And I feel like being 24, 25, 26, like, and I mean, we're still young and stupid, but like that we're in a better headspace to be making those decisions about the kind of design practices we have now than at least you and I think personally were when we were younger. Like,
Mhm.
and I think I will give CalArts its due and say that those were like constant conversations that we were
Mhm.
having. Was like really thinking, like letting ourselves consider ourselves designers and artists. And like
Mhm.
in animation, I had like one of my animation professors when I was like, I'm not an animator. He was like, you cannot say that anymore. And you need to give yourself the grace to like consider
Mhm.
yourself an animator. And I think as an artist, that's very difficult. And sometimes you are just
Mhm.
at art school to pay someone to tell you that you are an artist because it's
Yeah.
scary. It's
Right.
really friggin' scary. And I think it's laughable to take yourself seriously as an artist because it feels like such a goofy thing,
Yeah.
but it's very necessary. Like I take you very seriously as a designer, like someone who worked at a design studio for a summer, someone who's like had this like arc of not just
Mhm.
education but personal experience. Um, and I think in some ways it's kind of like garbage that we have to like go to art school to get that validation.
Mhm.
Um, because, you know, there are people who can't afford to go to a fancy art school, or they can't get a scholarship, or they don't have
Mhm.
those kinds of schools where they live. Um, and that's also kind of why I'm interested in creating a community like this where we can have these conversations so anyone from any background can like learn about this sort of stuff.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know. What do you think you're
Uh,
gonna do with your life? You got hopefully like 75 more years on you to be a designer.
That's a good question. I think, yeah, like you said, to just like tack on, I am really happy that Cal Arts did provide like this huge kind of alumni network and world of graphic design that I didn't know existed at all.
Yeah.
Um, and all of the professors, the way that they're out in the world, like doing things, and Louise has got her, you know, the AIGA medal, and
Yeah.
um, I think that really opened so many doors for me, just looking at where I see my career going and um kind of how I envision myself as a designer for the
Yeah.
future. I think before I would have been perfectly, I mean, I wouldn't say that I would have been perfectly happy, but it would have worked if I just went into a corporate job and I made money and I just did design. But I think the reason I wanted to go to grad school was because I did want to kind of push myself a little bit further than just kind of, you know, the basics. And I really wanted to just see how the world of like really high level graphic design with like, you know, all of the Michael Worthingtons and Lorraine Wilds and
Yeah.
all of them, I really wanted to just like be a part of that world. And so I think I'm really grateful for that. And I definitely see myself working kind of in that sphere. I don't necessarily see myself like going down the same path I would have after undergrad at all.
Yeah. I think
And
the,
yeah.
the drive to get not to cut you off, but the drive to get an
Yeah.
MFA pretty much always comes from like, I am a nerd about this topic. I'm very interested in it and I want to pursue it not at a higher level in terms of um like elitism, but a higher
Mhm.
level in terms of like academia. Like an MFA
Yeah.
at the end of the day is a graduate degree. And I think a lot of people shit on MFAs because they're like, oh, it's art school. Like, what's art school? But like
Right.
the kinds of philosophical discussions we have in class are they're philosophical and they're like underpinned by deep writing and insight that, you know, it's part of conversations that are decades,
Mhm.
centuries, millennia old, you know?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think like you especially in your thesis when you were sort of merging your two undergraduate degrees and like trying
Mhm.
to better understand both reading as a practice and how to design for reading experiences
Mhm.
is very nerdy, like in a positive way. Like
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
it's an academic research experience that you were in
Mhm.
pursuit of, and I
Mhm.
think that says a lot about what it means to pursue an MFA, not as a like expensive like trophy degree to hang on your wall, but as something that's like a genuine course of intrigue.
Right.
And you every conversation we've had in classes, like you've always been very like in line with that. So I think
Mm.
you yeah, like you and also not I don't think anything you were talking about is disparaging people who have just like a sort of linear corporate job because
Yeah.
that's what 98% of people in the world do. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and that's great
Yeah.
and fine.
Yeah.
And I think pursuing this like very sort of narrow academic interest is in many ways a lot more difficult financially and like personally
Yeah.
than like just getting a corporate job, which is like a wonderful thing to be able to do. Um,
Right.
and I think yeah, you don't sort of seem like the kind of person who would have enjoyed doing that. I think it makes sense that you went to grad school and are gonna sort of like carve your own weird path.
Yeah.
It's gonna be more challenging, which is like fine because you're up
Yeah.
for the challenge. But It's strange for sure.
Yeah, it is strange.
Is there anything
Yeah.
now that we're free from the shackles of education, is there anything
Yes.
um either A, that you're excited about looking forward, or B,
Mm.
that you can now sort of respect looking backwards about the educational experience that you've had? Either one or both.
Mm. Um, hmm. I mean, I feel that the design education that we had at CalArts was pretty intense and um definitely pushed us all to like really in the 3 years we were there, really challenge ourselves to become like, the best designers we could be.
Well, I don't know
And
if I'm there yet, but that was
I don't
definitely the
know,
goal.
but yeah, I was gonna say that that was only 3 years.
Yeah,
And also, it was very, we're all very young and we are all still figuring it out. And I think figuring yourself out as a designer just takes time and practice. And there's no prescribed, like, here's the diploma. You figured it all out. Like, it took 3 years exactly. I think some people have definitely, I mean, some people in our class are incredible and, they seem pretty good. And, I think I could still, figure it out. But I mean, our professor, Michael, he told us one time, he was just like, you guys are going to figure out so much more later,
yeah,
like in the world, outside of school. Like, you don't know anything right now. And he said that in the most loving way. And it's so true because
yeah,
I think we put so much pressure on ourselves in school to like have it all figured out and know what our practice is. And we were definitely pushed to answer those questions, but I don't think it was necessarily expected that we know the permanent answer for the future,
yeah,
that we know exactly what we're going to do and who we are as designers and all those other things. And I think I'm just really excited to get out in the world and just learn more from different areas of, society and culture and everything that exists outside the bubble of school.
yeah,
I think that's something that I'm kind of craving, especially since I went straight into
yeah.
art school after graduating undergrad. I think I'm just ready to be out in the real world. And I really enjoyed the past 2 summers working with Roman at his
Yeah.
studio. And I mean, really, like, design for me, where I get the most value out of it is like making something that can be used by other people or like other people find value. And I know that I did get kind of critiqued on like, why are you so people pleasy with your design? You look like you're like trying to please everyone. But in a way, I kind of am,
Yeah,
because when I go out in the world, it's like I want to make things for other people and I want to, use design as visual communication. And um I'm like excited to finally do that. I think that was one thing that school, it puts it on pause. You kind of have to be in your bubble for a little
yeah,
and kind of go crazy. And you have to like really get in your own head. But I'm really excited to kind of like get my head above water and
yeah,
just be out in the world and take everything I've learned. And I think it'll all start to also like fall in place like further down the line. I think some people said that at the alumni reunion. They were like, it'll make sense in like 10 years.
well, I think that was like very liberating. Was someone said it, and then I started quoting them, was like, your thesis is just, it's not like the end all be all, or you have to like understand everything. It is the first step towards the rest of your design career. And I think
Mhm.
thinking of it in that term is very, very helpful, because like we don't understand anything. And all the job rejections I've been getting are like, you clearly have design experience, but you have no like working experience in this
Yeah.
field. And it's 100% true that like, you know, design school prepares you to think very analytically and heavily
Mhm.
about the kind of work that you're creating and the kind of theoretical person you want to be. But, you know, none of our classes are about invoices or about, you know, like
Yeah.
real garbage practical stuff that we're going to have to
Yeah.
get really good at in order to make a
Mhm.
living, which I think is actually a good thing. I think it's a good thing to have 3 years to just be in fairy tale land because it forces you to learn so much more about the craft and like what area
Yeah.
you're interested in. For you, it's making
Mm.
things that people love and enjoy and that are beautiful. And for me, it's making things that are also beautiful but are educational, like this channel or like the zines that I'm making. And I think we only figure that out because you look back at your old work and you say, oh, this seed was planted 3 years ago. I did this
Mm.
project. Or like, oh, I remember this conversation I had in a winter session, and that's the thing that I'm pursuing now. But there are
Mm.
parts of my thesis where like I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed for weeks, and that didn't make sense at the time. And now I'm working on a new iteration of that project naturally because my brain has been like
Mm.
absorbing the stuff for so long. So
Mhm.
I do think it's nice to like be free and in the real world. And you're right that
Yeah.
like everything is just going to take time to kind of bloom, and it's
Mhm.
an exciting but scary thing. So
Mhm.
your perspective has been really helpful, and I know you've been one of my closest friends throughout the program, and it's been nice to have three and a
Yeah.
half years of, you know, or 3 years of these conversations building.
Yeah.
Very honored that you were my first guest to talk about
Uh,
design
I'm
stuff.
so honored. And I'm really glad. I mean, this is one example of the thing that you like, something that's always, you planted this seed like way early on.
Yeah,
You've always kind of like had this interest, and I'm glad that I can be a part of it.
hell
Really
yeah.
cool. Hell yeah.
Well, do you have any, we only have like a couple more minutes. Do you have any like parting
Mm.
words other than you're excited to like get going and do the thing?
I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I think in terms of design education, there's so many different ways you can go about it.
Yeah.
And I think, we talked about the practical and the, experimental and the real world and, all these other things. And I definitely think there's so many different paths you can take, but it's definitely everyone is so different, and everyone kind of goes down their own path. And even if it's not linear or kind of makes sense in the moment, it all just kind of works out, and the seeds are planted and eventually they just grow. And yeah, that's kind of just how I'm kind of looking at it now. And kind of a crazy last 7 years of
You ran a marathon.
education. And I know that it's not over either, just because, I think like I have a long way to go, like even just to continue learning. And yeah.
That's good. That's a beautiful end to the therapy session that is the beginning of the end of grad school.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I couldn't have uh I couldn't imagine a better way to phrase that part of the
Mhm.
journey. And I'm very excited to see everything that you end up creating. And I'm
Thank
very thankful.
you.
So
You
thanks for
too.
being here.
Yay. Of course.
All right.
Okay.